Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and I have been eating a carnivore diet for over 7 years now. And when I say that I'm eating a carnivore diet, that used to be a very simple explanation. When I first started 7 years ago, there was kind of just like one way everybody out there was doing carnivore. And for better and for worse, over the last 7 years, there has been a variety of different ways of doing carnivore that have kind of all popped up. There's been a lot of branches off of the diet, people looking for different things. And the good news around that is that there's a wide variety of ways that you can eat and kind of instructions and different paths that you can follow that could help you heal or lose weight or whatever your root cause issue is. The challenge though is that sometimes you hear all of these different names and it ends up being very confusing. Should I be doing the lion diet, carnivore, ketovore, meat-based, animal-based, BB, BNE, PMS? There's a lot of different acronyms. Like it can be very confusing of what is the difference between all of them, which one should I be doing, and which direction should I go in? So what I want to do in this video is explain what each of those different versions of carnivore are and the pros and cons around each of them so that you can determine what the best version is for you based on your health goals and the outcomes that you're looking for. Before we jump into all of those, I want to take a quick second and let you know that this video is sponsored by Element. Element is the electrolyte drink mix that I use every single day. I typically use the unflavored version, which is just sodium, magnesium, and potassium. I put it in my water every morning. It's how I start my day. It keeps me feeling my best. It regulates my digestive system, gives me lots of stable energy, and just helps me stay hydrated, especially this summer as I'm sweating a lot more, I'm working hard to be active. I'm actually adding a second pack of Element electrolytes in the afternoons, and I have been loving a little different treat of the new flavor of the lemonade salt. The flavored versions are sweetened with stevia, so they have no caffeine, no dyes, no sugar, and it's the perfect afternoon treat for me to have this summer. If you want to get a free sample pack, you can go to drinkelement.com/LauraSpath. They have a deal for all my subscribers where you can get a free sample pack with any purchase. Thanks to Element for sponsoring this video. Let's start off with like a basic, what is a carnivore diet? And the most simple way that I can explain it would be you're only eating meat and animal products, meaning meat, eggs, and maybe some dairy. I think dairy is kind of where you get into a gray area, but literally any meat. I always say, like, if it had a face on it, I'll eat it. If a vegan won't eat it, I'll eat it. And that's kind of like what I first learned about carnivore. I had heard about keto back in 2018 when I first started. Keto was all the rage and that's what everybody was doing. And then through our research of looking into keto, we found carnivore. And it was a really simple, like, eat some steak, eat chicken, eat meat and eggs, and that's kind of it. And for a lot of people, that's what they've stuck to. For the most part, that's what my husband and I have done for the last 7 years is eat the meat that we can afford, eat the meat that we like, eat meat that sounds good to us, and keep it really simple. Have some eggs occasionally. But over time, there has been a branch off of different segments of carnivore for a couple of different reasons. One, some people have reactions to some of those things that I mentioned. They have reactions to eggs. They can't tolerate all kinds of meats. Their health is in a very, they're very sick and they can't tolerate those things. And, Michaela Peterson has been the one who had a lot of health issues, and she took carnivore in this other direction where she has now named this the lion diet. And that typically is meat, salt, and water. And it's ruminant meats, not even. They're not eating chicken. They're not eating pork. They're not eating any fish. They're eating beef, lamb, bison, and salt and water. And that niche came about because there are people with skin conditions, autoimmune conditions, like major health issues. And they're having reactions to seasonings. They're having reactions to pork and eggs and seafood. And they're not able to physically tolerate those things. And so the lion diet, using that as the ultimate elimination diet for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then slowly adding back in other foods, can be really helpful for you to understand what foods are affecting you. Maybe you have a sensitivity to something that you didn't realize. And so spending some time on a Lion diet is a really great way to understand your baseline of how food is affecting you. Lion diet isn't necessarily the goal. This is not like the ultimate carnivore if you're on the Lion diet. Even Michaela is open about the fact that she would love to include other meats and other foods if her body was able to tolerate them. And typically, if you are only ever able to tolerate meat, salt, and water, and that's it for a very long period of time, there's likely some other deep-rooted health issue that's going on. Things like chronic inflammatory response syndrome, where your body can't detox toxins, like it can't eliminate toxins from itself. And so you may have to go down this other protocol, work with a doctor, a specialized doctor who helps with that elimination protocol. Like there's a lot of other ways to go. So if you've tried Lion diet and you've tried to continually add back in other foods and you really just can't without negative health issues, then that's something that you might want to look into figuring out what the root cause is. But that's the most restrictive version of carnivore. And it is a great way to have an elimination diet and then add things back in and see what you tolerate. A basic version of carnivore could include seasonings or not. You know, some people are going to tell me that I'm not carnivore because we eat seasonings. I occasionally eat pickles. You know, I'll drink a flavored element. I'll drink a Diet Coke occasionally. Obviously, none of those things are carnivore. So if we want to have the simplest version of carnivore, it would be meat, any variety of meats, salt, unflavored electrolytes, and then you're adding in some eggs. You're gradually moving more towards this, like what has been termed Ketovore, when you add things in like seasonings, some vegetables. There are a lot of people who do tolerate vegetables well. And in that case, they're eating predominantly meat and maybe there's one or two vegetables that they like. That's not really carnivore anymore, and that's okay. There are no rules. I always say this, like you have to do what works best for you. It matters way less what the rules are of a carnivore diet versus what are the foods that you personally can tolerate and that you're able to be consistent on long term. That's where you're going to find true healing. Another version of like carnivore specifically is Dr. Berry has coined the term B, 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 and E. And that is, I don't know what order it's in, but beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. And that is a way, I think, and not to interpret for him, but it's a very simple way of kind of like the Lion diet. You're doing an elimination protocol. You've noticed that there's no dairy, I mean butter, but there's no cheese, yogurt, a lot of the other things that can be inflammatory for people. It's really just giving somebody a very simple way of doing carnivore and, hey, try this BBB&E protocol for 30 days and see how you feel. And you've eliminated a lot of things that can negatively cause people issues. I don't think eating a piece of plain chicken if you're doing BBB&E is a failure, and I don't even think that Dr. Berry would say that either. I think it's just a really simple way of explaining and giving somebody the basics of carnivore in like a really simple acronym, which I think can be helpful for people. So that's where that version came from. The protein-sparing modified fast was created by Maria Emmerich and that part of the community, and it is where you are taking a very low-calorie approach that's predominantly, you're essentially eating only protein. You're eating egg whites, you're eating chicken breasts, like very lean things. So you've eliminated not only the carbohydrates, but you've also eliminated the fats. And so it's giving your body the protein that it needs, and then you are being able to tap into the fat that's stored on your body. And so I like the concept of this. In theory, it's like eat less fat, burn the fat on your body. And I think for a short period of time, that can be very helpful, especially if you don't like doing a true water fast or an extended fast. You could just, eat only protein for a day or two and let your body burn some extra fat. The downside is over time, you can, if you're doing it for too long, you're eating lean for too long, women especially can experience like hormone dips, energy dips. Like you're not giving your body any energy if you're eating predominantly protein. You've cut out your energy sources of carbs and fats. And so it can be very draining. You're going to end up hungry most of the time. And personally, I've experienced like hormone dips and things that don't go well with my hormones when I'm not getting enough energy or enough fat. So maybe for a day or two temporarily, and I know they have a protocol that's written out where you're doing different macros on different days. My husband sometimes, if he wants to drop some weight, he'll just drop his fat and maybe eat only New York strips and cut out some of the other fattier things that he eats. That wouldn't necessarily be a true protein sparing modified fast because he hasn't gone to the low enough calories and lean enough, but in his mind, he leverages that fat intake. On the other side of that, we also have this high fat carnivore protocol, which is predominantly where people are eating 80% fat to 20% protein ratio. So 80% of the calories that you're getting in from the day are coming from fat versus 20% is from protein. The pros to that is fat is very healing. So if you have hormone issues, if you've been struggling, if your body has been undernourished for a long period of time, the fat can be very healing for it. If your goal is to improve fertility, you should be eating a lot of fat. If we got to boost up our hormones, if you're in menopause, like you should be eating more fat. The downside to that is if you are eating an adequate amount of calories in a day to get in enough protein. Like that's the challenge. If you're focused solely on the 80% fat to 20% protein ratio, then unless you're eating a substantial amount of calories, you may be stuck with the 40, 50, 60 grams of protein a day. And typically that low protein over time can cause you also issues. You can start losing muscle mass. I dropped my protein macros too low for too long, even on carnivore, and my hair started falling out. So you can get you can have loose stools. Eating that much fat is oftentimes going to give you the runs. And so those are things that can be counter to that. But the other thing is eating that high fat with enough protein. So say you're eating 120, 130 grams of protein in the day. Well, that means your calories overall are going to be higher, around 3,000, 3,500 calories. And most people, myself included, are going to gain weight doing that protocol. So there is this balance of high fat is very healing, but it typically is not the best approach for weight loss. My macros, whatever that looks like, tend to shift back and forth. I've been tracking my food this week just to be able to like talk it through with you guys. A couple of days ago, I had a 66% fat to protein ratio. The other day it was 75% because I had a ribeye and I had a bunch of fattier beef bacon in the same day. And so I think it is pretty normal for those ratios to change over time. I don't think you should try to hit a certain ratio goal every day, but just know that if you're trying to heal something, you could add more fat in. You know, I do need to keep in a certain amount of fat in order to lose weight. And I have some videos on how I'm maintaining my fat intake in order to lose weight, but that can be the difference. Those are all the versions that I personally would call carnivore. And then you get into these like carnivore adjacent diets like Ketovore, meat-based, animal-based. The animal-based is what Paul Saladino used to be carnivore, and now he does what he calls animal-based, and that's where he's eating some meats. He's also eating a lot of organ meats. He is eating a lot of fruit and a lot of honey. And so a lot of his energy sources are going to be coming from fruits and honey and those types of things. And the benefit for him is that he is active, he's fit, he's lean. And so in his high activity levels, that's going to give him the energy that he needs. It also gives you a lot of variety. Like that's a benefit, is he's able to eat fruit and honey and a lot of other delicious foods. I think the downside to that protocol is anybody like myself who is struggling with obesity, I was pre-diabetic, I was trying to lower my insulin levels. That amount of fruit and honey, especially with my inactivity at my heaviest, would have been pretty detrimental to me. Also, fruit is very triggering for me. I can't eat a bunch of fruit, or I can't eat a moderate amount of fruit. A small amount of fruit is going to turn into more and more and more. And then the next thing you know, I'm eating a bunch of like normal carbs and sugar. And so the addict part of my brain can't moderate the fruit and the honey. And so I avoid anything that's like sugar related for those reasons. I'm pretty sure in the animal-based world, they're also eating a lot of raw dairy. And anytime weight loss is your goal or reducing inflammation is your goal, my suggestion is to cut out any and all major dairies, like especially drinking things like raw kefir. And I know I'm going to get pushback on this, but personally, if you think about the concept of milk and dairy, human babies, cow babies, any animal, mammal babies, the reason why they drink milk is to rapidly gain weight as a baby. And so it is designed to give you fat, like it's a high fat content. Even the raw ones is designed to have babies drink it and gain weight very quickly. And so if you're trying to lose weight, reverse your insulin resistance, I would really stay away from drinking liquid cottage cheese, dairy, and any of those types of like large consumptions of dairy, even if they are raw. I personally find the same results, and I'm assuming people will disagree with you on that. Next, we go into the version of Ketovore, which has been kind of adapted by people who eat a lot of meat, but they also sometimes like vegetables. And I wish I could be one of those people. I have a bite of a vegetable occasionally. My daughter doesn't finish all of her plate. I might do that. But I can't incorporate vegetables full-time into my diet because it causes me too many digestive issues. I love a big salad. My gut does not. It would leave me bloated, constipated. I've had a lot of issues in the past with hemorrhoids and constipations, and as much as I would love eating some Brussels sprouts, my gut would not handle those things properly. And so if you are somebody who loves eating a lot of meat, then you can add in some vegetables, and if you tolerate those well, great. That's maybe technically Ketovore. Maybe you have a little bit of berries occasionally too, and you're keeping things predominantly carnivore, but adding in a couple of those things. I don't think the Ketovore crew eats like keto treats. They're not eating a lot of desserts and things like that. They're not eating the keto products like the low carb tortillas and that kind of thing. It's predominantly whole foods, and it's sticking with mostly meat, but then adding maybe a small amount of berries or vegetables on the side, which, to be honest, I think if you can tolerate those things physically and if those things don't mentally trigger you, I think that's a great place to be. The pro of that is like, you're getting a lot of variety in, you feel like you're being able to just eat normal. It's probably not that hard to eat that way with friends and family. Nobody's gonna argue with you about eating meat and vegetables and a little bit of fruit occasionally. So to me, that seems like the most socially acceptable of all of them. Kind of along the lines of the Ketovore, I've also heard of Meatbased, and I don't really know the differences, to be honest, but it can be different for everybody. It's Meat-based is where people are predominantly eating meat, but then maybe they're having maybe a little less than Ketovore, I would say, of like they're having onions, they're having pickles, they're having a few other little things here occasionally. Maybe they're having seasonings, so maybe this is where I fall more into that category. But I'm not eating vegetables and fruits and like other whole foods, but I'm eating predominantly meat, but I would have a sauce, I would have some seasonings, I would have, you know, pickles, or maybe on the rare occasion I eat onions, I always regret it because my gut, I'll get bubble guts for a few days. But the meat-based is still in that vein. And I think the difference between meat-based and Ketovore, and like you'd have to ask individual people. I don't really know the difference. And I don't think there's not a set definition out there of it. Next, you can kind of move all the way into the version of keto or even all the way to low carb. Keto is a little bit misunderstood. Keto itself is this very specific macro ratio of the 75% fat, 20% protein, and 5% carbohydrates. Typically, it means that your net carbs are under 20 carbs. The net carbs gets a little tricky because net carbs usually means your total carbs minus fiber minus sugar alcohols. But, you know, I've seen low carb tortillas before that are listed as like 30 carbs, but they just have like 28 grams of fiber in them. And so maybe it's a 2 net carb, low carb tortilla, but it's just a pure fiber gut bomb that would leave me constipated, bloated, and gassy for days and days to come. So the same thing with like a lot of the keto desserts. There's a lot of packaged foods that can say keto friendly on them. And it's really just because they're playing around with adding a lot of sugar alcohols that can be subtracted with this net carbs. I think you end up with a lot of processed foods. Like the concept of keto is this specific macro ratio, but then somehow it's turned into like the packaged food world. And so if you're gonna do anything that's not I think Ketovore would be a much better option because you're eating whole foods and you're not getting into all of the packaged stuff. I personally, when I first went keto, there wasn't as many packaged foods back then, thankfully, but there was still low carb tortillas, macadamia nuts. Like those are things I had to cut out over time in order to heal my digestion and honestly to lose weight. I can't incorporate things like low carb. Like I'm never gonna lose weight. If anything, all of that fiber makes me swell up and hold a bunch of water weight. And so if you do want more variety in your life and your goal is weight loss, I would cut out all of those packaged foods and just stick to whole foods. Same thing with if your goal is to heal and to reverse some of your autoimmune conditions, like we shouldn't even be anywhere near this world where we're eating a lot of those packaged foods. And lastly, I know some people are now, even just in the low carb world, I think low carb is defined as anything under, I think it's like 130 grams of carbs per day. Maybe my kids probably fall into that category. They do have some carbs occasionally. We limit a lot of sugars. Any carbs that they're eating, we try to have them be more whole foods. They're very, very active, so they are eating some amount of fruit. They're probably not even getting over 100 grams of carbs per day. It depends on the day, honestly, but and it depends on their activity level. So I think if you are somebody who is already very fit, you are very active, your body can tolerate more carbs. But if you are insulin resistant, you have PCOS, you're type 2 diabetic, we got to get those carbs lower in order for your body to heal. If weight loss is your goal, and again, you're not super active, incorporating that amount of carbs is probably just going to keep your sugar high, keep your insulin higher, and it's going to have you retaining water. I notice a huge difference when I drop those carbs way down. My body instantly flushes out a lot of that water weight and I feel lighter, my digestive system improves, and I feel so much better. I'm curious where you fall in all of those different varieties of this diet. What I don't want is for people to just see all of the content online and get confused and give up and maybe don't try anything because they don't know where to start. Where you should start is what's most realistic for you in your life. And then you can kind of eliminate things over time or add things back in depending on how you feel and how you tolerate them. So I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching. You can come find me at Locals if you want more support, a community to talk to, people to ask questions with. If you need help figuring out macros and all that kind of stuff, you can come join my community. And there's a lot of people there that are willing to get to know you and help support you. Thanks for watching.